In this video, I want to decode some of the fancy metronome settings that you can have and play with, and give you the best settings to make playing with the metronome easy, accurate, and maybe even enjoyable. My name is Josh Gu, and I'm taking my years of experience learning, teaching, and performing, and sharing all of my best clarinet and music tips so you can get more out of your practice, and most importantly, have fun. You can learn more about all of my many resources at QuickStartClarinet.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Now, before we jump into the metronome tips, did you know that I actually have a full rhythm course called True Rhythm Mastery? If you're searching for some metronome tips, you maybe have a little bit of a tumultuous relationship with the metronome, and hopefully the tips in this video help you to get some different ideas and different ways of working with the metronome that make it easier. But you're never gonna love the metronome until you really understand rhythm, understand the connection between the note values on the page and the predictable steady beat, and getting those to come together and work together well. So if that sounds interesting to you, go to quickstartclarinet.com/rhythm and learn more about True Rhythm Mastery, because that whole course is about developing the strong fundamentals of pulse, understanding how all aspects of rhythm really work, so that you can feel like you've truly mastered rhythm, rather than it being this tricky thing that you're never quite sure if you're getting it or not. So again, go to quickstartclarinet.com/rhythm if that sounds interesting to you. All right, let's jump into the metronome tips. So here's my metronome. This is the ultra fancy metronome. There's all kinds of different options here. This is the tonal energy metronome. I actually don't use this one all the time. I have a couple of different metronome apps that I like to use. My typical go-to one is just called Tempo. It's very simple. It's just the metronome, so it's a little bit easier. The tonal energy metronome is fantastic and has so many different settings and options, which is sort of why I wanted to use this one and go through it. Also, the other one's on my phone and not on my iPad because I record with my phone. So this is what we got. So looking at this, the first thing that I want to suggest is don't stress so much about the time signatures. I think this is something that we honestly just waste a lot of time in practice doing, where we're like, okay, I'm playing a piece in 4/4, so I got my metronome going in 4/4. Okay, now I have to change, oh, this piece is in 2/4. Okay, now I have to go to 3/4 for the next section of the piece, and it's just constantly having to mess with the meter, move it around. And the worst part is, a lot of times we don't even pay attention to it. The nice thing about the 4/4 meter is it gives you that little extra accent on one, so you can hear. So you have that little extra accent there to really show you that this is where beat one is. In the Tonal Energy app, at the bottom of the screen, there's that button for the accent. So you can turn this on or off. So if you have this off, then all the beats sound the same. So there's that option. Or what I personally like to do is just set the meter to 1/4. Just a plain old standard click. Nothing fancy about it. If you think about it, this is what the old-fashioned metronomes that would actually manually click back and forth. You just get one sound of click, and that's kind of my favorite. It's just the one. Sounds the same every time. You could put the accent on, and it'll sound different, but still the same every single beat. So that's my first general tip, is probably just work in 1/4. There may be times that you'll want to do the time signatures, which I'm going to talk about because I do think it can be helpful. But for the most part, 1/4 is the way to go. You just have the beat to line up with. You're not going to have to change the meter every phrase whenever the time signature changes in your music. It's just there, and it works for 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4, 6/8, 9/8, 12/8. It's the same, just steady click. You can make whatever the steady beat is in your time signature that 1/4 click. Now, when would it actually be useful to pull up the specific meters? The only time that I encourage doing this is when you have pretty complicated rhythms in the measure. Maybe you have like an obscure amount of rests and then some weird tied notes, and you're not sure if you're actually holding the rests or the long notes, the proper note value. Because when it's on 1/4, there is the possibility that you skip over a whole beat or even add a whole beat. That's always a possibility, and you don't know when it's just on 1/4. So if you ever have any doubts of like, does this 3/4 measure actually have 3 beats in it? Then turn on the 3/4 time signature with the accent on beat 1, so that's that accent down there, and then play your measure, making sure that you start on 1, play just the measure, whatever the music is. Okay, there I ended on 1. And if you end with the accent on 1, then you're in good shape. If you end not with the accent on 1, then something went wrong. You added a beat, you skipped over a beat, something happened. And that's the good use of this. I also really like, especially in tonal energy, has so many options. Most metronomes do though. If we're playing in something like 5/8, and we need to actually keep track of the changing beat. 1/4 works for every time signature except for asymmetrical time signatures. So that's your 5/8, 7/8, 8/8, those kinds of things where you have some beats of 2/8 notes, some beats of 3/8 notes. Now in 5/8, you can have a really nice clear 2+3 grouping where you have that 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That nice grouping to it, which is great if you want that structure to it. But there's also a way to get this, again, just in our simple 1/4 subdivision. So first thing you need to do is put it back to 1/4 and then turn on the 8th note subdivision. And that's going to give you all of the 8th notes of 5/8. And then make sure in your options for tonal energy that you have the subdivision uses beat sound turned on. Then you can either take off the accent, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, or you can leave the accent on and then tap this to where it's blue, to where this is just a normal beat, not a purple accented beat, and it works the same way. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And the nice thing about this is, again, you don't have to change so much. I can be in, okay, I'm in 4/4. Now I'm in 5/8. And it's very, very simple. There's not so many buttons to press with changing the meter, making sure the accent of the meter is right, making sure you're actually listening to and following the accent of the meter. It's just a little bit simpler version of it. Of course, the downside is you don't have the accents of the meter. So just like I was saying for when to use like the actual 3/4, actual 4/4, if you're not confident about how you're fitting in with the 8th note beat, then you might want to add those accents to sort of keep you in line. Not to have too many self-promotion, shameless plugs, but you also might want to get Truer the Mastery to help you know how you're always fitting in with the 8th notes. But that's a little tip for making this easier, making it not so complicated. Now I have a few more thoughts on some tonal energy settings, and then we'll move into some sort of different types of metronomes that may or may not be worthwhile. So a couple other settings to be thinking about. There's this 8th note equals 8th note. You may have noticed when we switched to 5/8, instead of it staying at 100, it switched to 66.666666, technically rounded up to 67. Because what it's doing is it's making the 8th notes at 100 become the 8th notes in 5/8, so the dotted quarter note beat, and you can see up here at the top, the beat is a dotted quarter note. That's at 66.7. If we change this to quarter notes, then that would be changing the beat where the quarter notes are equaling each other. So the other thing that we can do is go back to 1/4. That'll change it to 100. Take off the 8th note equals 8th note. Now when we go back to 5/8, we're still at 100. So the tempo is actually shifting a little bit. The 8th note tempo is shifting, but the quarter note tempo, or the quarter note tempo in 4/4 is becoming the dotted quarter note in 5/8. So you have, that's in 5/8, back to 1/4, So it kind of becomes triple at 2 and 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 becomes triple at 2 and triple at 2 and 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. So that's how the eighth note equals eighth note works. If you see eighth note equals eighth note in your music, then you can just take whatever tempo you were going in 4/4, 3/4, or whatever simple meter, change to the asymmetrical meter, and it'll do the math for you. Or if it's eighth note equals eighth note, you can just turn the eighth note subdivision on in 1/4. I like to keep things simple generally. So that's another little cool setting. There's all these presets too, which you can do crazy things with, where you set 4 measures of 4/4, then 2 measures of 7/8, and things like that. I'm not going to go too deep into that because personally I never use it, because I just stick with my 1/4. If I'm switching between 4/4 and 7/8, then I put on the eighth notes, and that's the eighth notes in 4/4, and then the eighth notes in 7/8. So it's really straightforward. If you want to get into really programming it and really having the metronome click exactly the beats that you have, by all means, you can do it, but it's not necessary. And that's kind of the point of this video, is to show you that you can make playing with the metronome so much simpler. Don't overcomplicate it. Just put on your click, play with your steady beat, because that's the value of the metronome, is giving you a steady beat to line up with. Now, some other sort of features, and this is starting to get into the other types of metronomes. You can have different visual things. We have these little different visuals. Hold on, let me turn the tempo down so it's not too crazy. So you can see what's going on there. And it's really nice that Tonal Energy has so many options. Sometimes I do like the visuals where it has a little bit of predictability to it. You can be seeing where you're leading from beat to beat, so it's really fun. I love the Tonal Energy smiley face. That's my favorite part of the tuner. So there's all kinds of different things you can do. You can also do different sounds, so there's so many different sound options. Depending on what kind of playing you're doing, you might want a different kind of sound. If you're used to playing with drums, you can have different drums going, and this is where maybe having some beat patterns could be useful for you, so you can hear different kinds of accents and emphasis, just like it would be if you were playing kind of with a drummer. It's obviously not exactly what a drummer would do, but it gives you some ideas to explore and work with there. So those are the features of Tonal Energy. Oh, there's one more, this light too. So you can have a flash to the screen. The Foursquare metronome also has this option where you can have a visual metronome and sort of see. And that leads us to this next topic, which is visual metronomes and vibrating metronomes. So I, again, personally don't use these too much, but I have some experience with them, and I wanted to just put in my 2 cents with this metronome video. So the first idea that I have when it comes to these kinds of things is they definitely can be helpful. Both the visual and the vibrating metronome are nice that they don't make a sound, so you can really listen to your sound. You don't have the click of the metronome getting in the way of the sound you're producing. It also can be very handy for performances where you can't actually click out loud a metronome before you start playing. But if you just want to check in with the tempo, make sure you're starting where you're intending to start, it can be a great way to have just a little help with that in a performance. Now, the downsides of them, both visual and vibrating, are that they're pretty easy to ignore. A visual metronome, you can sort of just tune it out, even if it's like the screen that you're looking at the music on, even if that's flashing, it's still relatively easy to tune out. Flashing, if it's like the flashlight on your phone, still easy to tune out eventually. And I think the reason why it's easy to tune out, same thing with the vibrating one, like you feel it, which is great, but you can sort of ignore it pretty easily, is because you're making sound on your instrument or with your voice, and that's what needs to be lining up with the beat. So if the beat is also sound, then it's really easy to hear the sound you're playing, hear the sound of the metronome, and those are the things that need to be connected. Whereas seeing a flash or feeling a vibration and connecting that with the sound that you're hearing is a little bit different. It's easier to sort of ignore the feeling sensation or the seeing sensation and only be focusing on the sounds that you're making rather than really putting them together. I do like the idea, and I've played with vibrating metronomes, and I love the idea that it can help you internalize the pulse. And to me, I think its greatest pro is also its greatest con, where it's not intrusive to the music is the pro. It helps you internalize the pulse and feel the pulse for yourself and feel it internally. But also the con is that you're not hearing it, so you can ignore it. If you're not really taking the time to internalize the pulse and feel it, you can ignore it, and then it's not actually there and not actually helping you have a steady beat. So those are my 2 cents on the sort of vibrating or visual metronomes as well. So let me know in the comments if you have any other metronome questions or metronome thoughts. Hopefully this was helpful. I really encourage all of you to try the just 1/4 metronome setting. Personally, it saves so much time not having to change the time signature every time. And I find even when students do put it on the specific time signature, maybe the first time they start with the click on one, but then they usually stop doing that. Or again, you're having to wait every time you restart to find the click on one. So give that 1/4 setting a try. Let me know in the comments how you like it. Let me know in the comments any of your other metronome hacks or questions or anything like that. I hope that you enjoyed this and got a few useful tips out of it. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in another video. And last but not least, a huge heartfelt thank you to the Dennersons. This is like the QuickStart Clarinet family who supports the channel and helps to make everything that I do possible. If you would like to support the channel and get some awesome rewards in return where we can work one-on-one over video and you can have my full support moving forward on your clarinet journey, then go to quickstartclarinet.com/supporter.